Okay, so this particular chapter is about consumer loans. Okay. And consumer loans are actually quite common. They're needed. Um, you and I, as consumers, buy lots of different things. Some of those things are quite large. Some of those things aren't. But either way, we would look for, in some cases, need a loan to help us purchase it. Okay. Um, Normally speaking, we borrow money for things like cars and other large purchases. But there's also other types of things that people borrow money for, including vacations, weddings, college education, and just general stuff. Um, so we're going to look at a few of the consumer loans that are listed here. Normally speaking, you would only need a consumer loan to buy what we call a big ticket item, usually something that's expensive. Okay. Um, Consumer loans work different than credit cards. In the last chapter, we looked at credit cards. Credit cards are revolving credit lines, and so you can use them over and over and over again. You can use it, pay it back, use it again, pay it back, use it again, pay it back. Consumer loans are different. They're loans that have payment schedules. And once you pay those loans down every month, you can't borrow any of the money back. Okay. And so they're basically what we call installment loans. Okay. Most of these loans you can pay month to month. There are a couple of exceptions. There are what we call single payment loans. The loan is due all in one lump sum. Not recommended for most people. All right. What your book does introduce you to are common loans. The most common one that most of us are going to be using in our lifetime are auto loans. It's very common to purchase a car like you and I know the average new car is running around $35,000 in price. Even the average used car right now is close to 20 grand. So oftentimes coming up with that much money to pay cash for the car is very difficult for most people. So they put a down payment down and they take out an auto loan. That's a consumer loan. How auto loans work, as you know, is the loan is for a given period of time. You usually pick the term, 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, what have you. And you pay monthly installments until the balance is zero. You cannot borrow the money back. Like with a credit card, you can borrow that money back if it's revolving. In this case, it's not a revolving loan, it's an installment loan. You probably often see commercials for your local furniture store. I watch the news and weather and sports, and Raymore and Flanagan is big on buy now, pay later, and those types of loans are consumer loans. When you open up a line of credit at your local furniture store, or even if you need to buy appliances like a refrigerator or computer equipment at a Best Buy or electronic store of some sort, you're usually buying goods that are going to last longer than a year. That's a durable good. They tend to be long term. You keep them for the long term. And oftentimes those stores allow you to finance that. Those are consumer loans as well. Your education loans, I think it's interesting. They do classify them as consumer loans. There are large differences, however, in an education loan versus all the other loans that are here. I'm going to get to that in a moment. You can take out what's called a personal loan. It's going to be based on your credit score, your reputation of paying loans back to other people that you owe money to. So these personal loans tend to be unsecured. They're not secured by anything. Whereas an auto loan or loans on durable goods, oftentimes you need to put up the car as collateral for the loan. That guarantees the lender that if you can't pay the loan back, they at least can take the car back and get their money back. That doesn't happen with personal loans. Personal loans are overwhelmingly based on your credit. There's nothing really you have to give up, just the promises that you've made in the past and how good you've kept your promise is reflected in your credit score. So personal loans are somewhat needed for anything. You can take a personal loan to get married, take a vacation, pay for funeral expenses. I mean, the unexpected stuff usually is what personal loans are made for. And then they have these other things called consolidation loans, which basically means that you might have, say, a MasterCard with a balance, and you might have a Visa with a balance, and you might have a furniture loan with a balance, and you might have several loans that you're paying separately every month. Well, what if you consolidated those? In other words, what if you, instead of paying individual payments on 7 loans, what if you just paid them all off into one loan and just pay one payment for that loan? That's a consolidation loan. There's problems with consolidation loans because once people, and people do this with credit cards, they have a whole bunch of credit cards, whether it's a Visa, MasterCard, or a store card, or whatever, department store card, or a gas card. They have tons of credit cards. They decide, but I'm sick of making all these minimum payments or all these payments to all these credit cards. I really need to pay everything and just have one loan and just pay one payment on one big loan. Well, they take a consolidation loan. What does that do? Well, they pay off all their cards. Now all their cards have 0 balances. And what do? They go back out and spend on the cards. So the consolidation loan doesn't really help them unless they're freezing their accounts or cutting up those other cards. It just basically creates a way to consolidate your debt into one payment, but it does free up all the balances on your credit cards. So people end up spending again. It doesn't work out for most people. It can work out, but it doesn't work out for most people. Let's get back to the education loans as different. Regardless whether you need a personal loan or a loan for a durable good, be it furniture, computers, televisions, etc., a personal loan or a consolidation loan, they are going to do a credit background check on you. Overwhelmingly, that means they're going to buy a credit score from a company like FICO, Fair Isaac, right? That credit score is going to allow them to assess the risk of giving you a loan. And that risk means, well, if you're not so risky, I'll give you a low interest rate on the loan. If you're very risky and I still want to give you the loan, I have to charge you a much higher interest rate. So that's how those work. Education loans, all you need to do is be a full-time student or have a certain number of credits as a college student. And that's it. Then here, just sign your life away. That's very dangerous. They don't do a background check in terms of your credit, or it's very, very dangerous. And they get, most of these education loans are going to young, relatively young people who may have never had another loan, may not understand the system, the lending business, as we say. And so it's easy to sign these things because you can go, the sad part is you can go to any college, in most cases, you can go to almost any college you want, as long as you're willing to take a bigger loan, to go there. So if you're insistent on going to culinary, or you're insistent on going to Marist, then you can go ahead and go to any school you want to go to, as long as you're willing to take out a loan. Okay. Yeah, that's a pretty heavy loan. And loans take a long time to pay back. They take a very, very long time to pay back. Okay. Well, all right. So it's so easy to get into, because it's easy money. You just have to be a full-time student or a matriculated part-time student in a program. The college verifies that, and you get your loan. Just sign the paper. It's super easy. That's crazy in a way. You got to be careful. If it sounds too good to be true, you might be falling into a little bit of a trap there. So we do have issues with student loans that have become unmanageable for some people because, in essence, it's easy money. So as long as you're willing to sign the paper and take the loan, you can go anywhere you want as long as you pay for it with a loan. Because colleges aren't giving out scholarship money like they used to. Back in the 70s, there were basically $3 of scholarship money for every dollar of loan that a student needed. Today, it's more the opposite. Most of the money that colleges dole out are in the form of loans, and not in the form of scholarships. All right, as it's mentioned in your book here, for the most part, there are what we call federally sponsored student loans. These are programs that have been created through federal legislation to encourage banks and other lenders to lend money to students so they can get an education. I think at the very, very beginning of all of this, the intent was good, right? Why should a bank give you a loan to go to school? Right? Chances are you're not working, or you're working part-time, you don't have your education yet, you're not making much money. It was a little bit too risky at the start for banks to give people loans just to go to school because they didn't get a promise that they were going to get repaid. So the federal government came in and said, look, we promise those will be repaid. And that's basically what happened. All these student loans, Stafford, Perkins, and PLUS loans, basically the federal government has said to the lenders, lend the money, we guarantee repayment. And so they do, and they do it freely. Now, you might not know, but you probably read a little bit in Chapter 6 for bankruptcy. Federal student loans cannot be discharged in bankruptcy. You'll always have to pay those back, okay? So it's one of those types of things where the federal government backs the loan. If you don't pay the bank back, the federal government takes possession of that loan and you got to pay the federal government back. You cannot win a battle with the federal government in terms of not paying the loan. They will do everything. Of course, they'll take your tax refunds. They'll garnish your wages. They will take your Social Security checks or part of them to pay the loan back. You will always pay the loan back because the federal government has guaranteed the loan. So in essence, you owe this to the federal government, even though the bank gave you the loan. The bank doesn't care whether you paid it back or not because the bank's going to get its money. The federal government's already promised them that. But you have to pay back the loan. Even if you declare bankruptcy, you might get rid of some credit card debt and some other loans. Guess what? You never, ever, ever, the way the law is written, never will get rid of your federal student loans. So it's very, very dangerous. It's easy to get because it's easy money, but it's very difficult to ever, ever, ever get out of, even if you have a great excuse. You might be able to get out of certain debt through bankruptcy, but you're never, ever, ever going to get rid of this. So be careful. The best of these deals are, the Stafford and Perkins loans. These are direct loans, right, to students at very, very low interest rates in most cases. Because the cost of college has gone out of sight over the years, the inflation rate for college tuition is higher than the inflation rate in healthcare. A lot of us bitch about how healthcare has cost more and more money over time. Yes, it's true, it has. But look at tuition rates. The cost of college has gone up even higher than that. So it's crazy amount of money being spent, and the tuition is very high. So they allow parents to borrow money as well to help pay. This is part of it. Okay. So direct loans have specific interest rates, but I think it's important to understand that there are fees for the loan. Okay. Now these are fees that help to pay for the processing of the loan, which is almost always done at the bank. And that means that even though you got, say, a loan, 1% of that loan amount is going to be taken out up front as a fee for processing that loan. It's worse for plus loans. 4% of those of that loan is going to be taken out of the loan for the fee. So what does that mean? Well, for your parents, it's worse news than for you. So for every $1,000 your parents take out as a loan, $42 in this case is taken out right away as a fee, which means that they owe $1,000, but they're only going to get $958 to help pay for you. They owe $1,000, but they're going to get less than that, and that's because they're going to be paying a fee up front. That's how those loans work. For you, for every $1,000 that you borrow, they're taking, $10 off the top for themselves as a fee. So you get $990 for the loan, but you owe them $1,000. And that's basically it's a cost to the loan. It just adds to the cost of the loan. If you owe someone $1,000 because you took a loan, you say they gave you $1,000. That's why you owe them $1,000. Well, no, they didn't give you that much because they took a fee out right away. So you actually got a little bit less. Your parents are getting a raw deal because they're paying a higher fee for their loans. So again, it costs money. It costs money. And the interest rates are, usually lower than other private loans. You can get private loans as well. These are federal loans, but there are other businesses now that actually give private loans. Other lenders that actually will privately, but they charge you a lot more interest. So this is part of it. All right, while we're talking about student loans, let me show you a little bit about lending around New York to some of the schools. And I'd be interested to know if there's some schools you're interested in attending. At least you can see where some of the data is. So I'm going to take you to the internet to a couple of different sites. The first site is known as basically the Project on Student Debt. And it's going to show you a little bit. I'm going to kind of poke around with you and show you a few things. So hang in there with me. I'm going to share the screen now. All right, so this is something called the Institute for College Access and Success. I just want to get an idea if you can see. Can you see that screen? Yeah. All right, so what you notice here, this is an interactive map, student debt and the class of 2019. The map is color-coded, indicating the average amount of debt is highest in the purple states and is lowest in these like peach types of states. The wonderful thing about this interactive map is when you when you point to a state, it actually tells you the amount of students who graduated with debt and what that average debt was. So down in Texas, for example, of all the graduates, all the college graduates in 2019 who got their bachelor's degree, 48% of those students graduated with debt, and the average debt was $26,951. And Texas is sort of that moderate type of state, okay? When you look at Florida, Florida's a little bit on the lower side. For all of the college graduates that had bachelor's degrees in Florida in 2019, 48% of them graduated with debt, and the average debt load was $24,629. Pretty good amount of debt. Let's come to New York. Okay. In New York, of all of the class of 2019 that graduated with bachelor's degrees, 58% of those graduated with student loan debt, and the average debt was $31,155. Okay. Now, and we can look, Massachusetts is also known for its colleges and universities. 55% of their graduates of 2019 graduated with debt, and the average debt was over $33,000. New Jersey next to us, about the same. But in this case, 64% of that class, so basically 2 out of 3 students in New Jersey who graduated with a bachelor's degree in 2019 graduated with average debt of $33,566. So this is a very interesting interactive map, and you can see that's up here. This is the website if you're interested in that. Let's go deeper into New York. I'm going to click on New York. If you click on it, they have a whole bunch of interesting information here. I'm going to make the information a little bit larger so we can see things better. Okay. So what this tells us is here, and you can download the table if you want, but this is for the entire state of New York for the class of 2019. So that means they graduated in May of 2019. Again, 58% of the graduates in 2019 had debt, and the average debt was $31,155. It's interesting to note that 28% of graduates in 2019 also had debt, but it wasn't federal debt, right? It was other programs that lent them the money. And then there's a list of colleges. So let's just go to a couple of colleges that are close by. First of all, if we're doing alphabetically speaking, there's a lot of people, a lot of people wonder where to go after, where to transfer. You know, I really like, personally speaking, I like Baruch. Sadly, all the CUNYs don't have a lot of data here. Hunter College does. Hunter College for CUNY is really known for programs like in criminal justice. No, actually Hunter is general. John Jay is criminal justice. But they had a very low rate. 15% of their graduates had debt averaging $15,000. That's extremely low. The one thing about CUNY schools is that they tend to have lower tuition and lower debt loads for their students. So I've always been fond of the CUNY system in general. Let's take a look at a few others here. So, okay. Here is the Culinary. Can everyone see the Culinary Institute number here? I don't want anyone to die here, but it's $51,000. $51,200 of debt for their graduates. 63%, so about 2 out of 3 of their graduates ended up graduating with an average of $51,000 of debt. That's a lot of cooking you got to do.
I have actually 6 culinary graduates in my school. I mean, in my family, and not one of them regrets it though. They love what they do, and one lives in France, one lives in Colorado. I mean, they're living life. And
did they? You don't have to answer this question, but did they graduate with a large student loan debt?
I'm gonna say yes. I mean, they're.
No, you don't know for sure.
I don't know. I mean, but none of our family has a lot of money like that. So, you know.
There's ways to keep the cost down, and you
Yeah.
don't have to borrow that much, but it is a very high debt load, much, much higher than the average, as you can see. That's why
The
I
good,
pointed it out. And it's something in the area that we all know because we all are local, Dutchess. So I'm just kind of looking at our local area.
oh
Yeah.
no, I mean the thing is that the culinary. I mean, that some schools don't list though is the the guaranteed job afterwards. Like their percentage of like jobs after graduating is like in the 90 percentile, which is
Okay. That's good. If they're good for that, that's good. That's
yeah.
really good.
Where a lot of schools,
A lot of schools, promise you a lot. They don't always deliver.
exactly, yeah. I mean, because some of these big top schools, they're like low 80s and high 70s, and that's like you're paying 30 plus a semester, and you're getting a 78% job afterwards. Like, I don't think so.
Yeah, that's not worthwhile. Yeah, exactly.
I actually,
Yeah,
I
go
went,
ahead.
I went to the Culinary Institute for a year. So almost over half
Ooh.
finished. And there were things about it that weren't good for me, so I did not continue. But what's interesting is it's so expensive, and the general job afterwards is minimum wage. So there have been
That's a
several
risk.
class action lawsuits won against culinary schools for charging so much.
Yep.
And these jobs you get when you get out don't pay much. It's like he said, though, you have to love it. It's one of those things you gotta love it.
That's right. I agree. Good point. All right, let's continue here. Mount St. Mary, which is down in Newburgh, and some people, their debt load is relatively lower, 28,519, but 82% of their graduates had that type of debt on average. This is an average when they graduated in 2019. That's a very high percentage that are apparently saying their prayers. Yes, there's puns that are coming. Let's take a look. Well, we don't have any information for PACE, which is too bad because we have some folks that go down to PACE. There's a lot of schools here. Now we're getting into some of the SUNYs. A lot of people go from Dutchess, they'll go to New Paltz. Where are you, New Paltz? Did you see New Paltz on here? I did not see New Paltz on here. Ha! No, Buffalo, Brockport. So that's a mystery. But in any way, you can see from some of the other schools here, like Plattsburgh and Potsdam, the majority of students are graduating with some debt, and it's about 30 grand. Again, these loans are not just for tuition. It's not like the tuition is really high at some of these schools. Loans are to cover everything, including your living expenses. So that's renting a place and eating and things like that. So the loans can pile up, and that's the danger here. Some of our students go on to Albany. Albany, about 2/3 of them will graduate with debt. 27,000 is about a little below the average for New York State. Right. Again, the wonderful thing about this listing is you can look them up. Oh, here's SUNY New Paltz. Okay, here we go. State University. They just wrote them all out. Instead of SUNY, they decided, let's write out State University. Makes it better. 26,771 was the average debt of graduates in 2019, and 62% of graduates had some type of student loan debt to pay back as well. I didn't see, Vassar is on here as well. I didn't see Marist, so I'll have to go back.
Yeah, Marist was at about 40,000.
Marist was on the list. Okay, I must have missed it. Now Vassar, this is one of the differences. If you're lucky enough to get into some of these older, very well established, liberal arts colleges that have been around for years and years and years, and that's so you have your Ivy Leagues and you have your elite liberal arts schools like Vassar. They have large endowments. They are very good at helping students who need help, and you can see that because even though half of the students that graduated had debt, it was only 19,000, less than 20 grand. That's because they do subsidize. I've seen that, whether it's Harvard or whether it's Yale or private schools that are pretty elite, they have money and they do help their students out that have financial need and keep that debt load down. All right, let's go back up because I missed Marist and you guys said it was there. So let me go back up here. Oh, there it is, Marist. Sorry. Whew, I missed that one. In 2019, about 2/3 of their graduates had student loan debt of about 40 grand was the average. So again, it's quite a debt load. Now, how well are those folks doing is important. Well, if you have that type of debt, you should be able to pay it back. If the school is pretty good and employers are paying good money for its graduates. Because literally when you graduate college, I mean, and a lot of people don't have that type of work experience, particularly if it's a traditional school, you enter at 18, you graduate at like 22, you probably never had a full-time job, before. So the fact that if an employer looks at that and says, I'm willing to pay good money for those graduates, that's good. And that does happen. You can actually find those statistics in terms of the average salary of graduates in a program. My daughter, stepdaughter technically, but my daughter went to the Eisenberg School of Management at the University of Massachusetts because the average graduate of the University of Massachusetts Business School was earning about 55,000, and that's exactly, actually she came out higher than that when she graduated with no work experience other than Dunkin' Donuts, and that was a summer job. So obviously employers think highly of the education at that college, so they're willing to pay graduates quite well. That's another indicator to look at when you're looking at where to transfer to. Okay, if I transfer to this school and I graduate, what employers are going there to recruit and what are they offering graduates in terms of money? That also is reflected in this other thing. There's another website called the College Navigator. It's from the National Center of Education Statistics. And it just happens that I did look up Marist College prior to class. So Marist College is here. There's a lot of information on it. But I want to bring it down to something called the default rate. This is their this is on student loans. This is on student loans. What percentage of their students are not paying back their loans? And as you see, Marist had a relatively higher than average debt load for New York State, 40 grand, right? Well, the default rate's very low. It was 3% in 2016. They had quite a lot of folks, 1,367 folks paying their student loan on time and fine, but 42 of students have not paid back their loans or are default. They've stopped paying. So default is stop paying on a loan. When you stop paying on a loan, it's in default. That's basically how it's looked at. So that's actually that's a low rate. It's low because the national average is over 10% now. 10%. And that's actually lower than it was before. If I'll look at culinary. And let me show the results. Hopefully the Culinary Institute shows up, which it does. So remember, I was mentioning culinary has a very high, I mean, it's 50,000. Well, let's look at their default rates. 7%, 7.4% for that same type. Everyone see it down here. I know it's small numbers. This is government. This is a government National Center for Education Statistics. It has a lot of statistics, but so here, what you could say from that is what Clark was mentioning earlier, is that some people who go through that program will end up getting a job that simply is paying minimum wage or close to minimum wage. And on that type of salary, how can you pay back a $50,000 loan? It's very difficult. So even though people are trying, there's people are going to be defaulting. They're unable to pay it. Other people, obviously, because 7.8%, 8% basically means that 92% of the folks who had loans are doing fine, which is what Adam was telling us, right? His family went there. A lot of his relatives went there, and they got great jobs. Okay, they're paying back their loans if they have it, right? But I think it would be interesting to know that if I'm going to go and to a particular school, and that school is going to basically mean accepting a loan to go there, I want to make sure that the students who have been there already are able to pay back their loan, because that's likely going to happen to me. So this default rate says that people that are graduating from Marist, even though they have a large loan, are managing those loans well, very well. The folks that graduate from the culinary, in comparison, twice as many of them are having difficulty paying the loan back, because you go from 3% to over 7%. So it's more than twice, or more than double. So that tells me that, you know, it's a little bit more risky. It doesn't always work out for a lot of students. Let me go to Mount St. Mary, which is down in Newburgh. We saw that 82% of those students have loans to pay back, although the loan wasn't excessive at all, 27, 28,000. Well, if you look at their default rates, they're at 5%. They're at 5% in 2016. So, so what does that mean? Well, a few more students who got out of Mount St. Mary had a hard time finding a really good job compared to those that went to Marist. Those that went to Marist had a little bit of an easier time getting a good paying job because they were able to pay their loan back. Mount St. Mary, their default rate is higher, so some of those students had a harder time finding their job and to pay back their loan. Culinary, even higher. So that's just part of the risks that are involved in taking a student loan. Again, you can go to any, so I'll say it over again, you can go to any school you want to, as long as you're willing to take out a loan to get there. That's the sad part of where we're at, you know, in our higher education history here. I just think it's risky in some cases. I think it's risky. I don't think it's risky to get a degree. I think it's risky how people want to take lots of money out in loans to pay for the degree. I will talk about that in more detail next class. So some interesting information for you to think about, yes? And a couple of websites that I introduce you to that might be food for thought for you as you decide, for those of you that are going to continue and transfer to another school. It's a lot more than the fact they have a nice gym, you know, or they have a nice, you know, the dorm is really nice, and you know, there's a lot more to analyzing the decision than that.
Well, what was that website that you were on? That works for all states, right?
Yes, I'll go ahead and post the websites for you, so you can have that information as well. But I was thinking that this is something that a lot of people don't look into, but it's really related to the student loans that are talked about. Okay, so a little extra at no extra cost. Gotta love it. Gotta love it. Okay. Sorry. You know, I had to do something like that. All right. Real quick, a few other points here, and then we're going to wrap up. Back to our slideshow. Most consumer loans are considered installment loans because you pay them over a period of time in monthly payments. There are loans that are called single payment loans that I would not recommend. But that's full payment plus interest on a due date. Most of us are not, I mean, if you don't have the money to buy it, or you're going to have all the money all of a sudden 6 months from now to pay it back, I mean, it's a little bit risky. Installment loans tend to be the most common. Most installment loans have a fixed interest rate to them. The interest rate stays the same when you get the loan, and that's it. On occasion, you can have an installment loan that actually has a variable rate, which means that the interest rate will be adjusted every year or so, depending on the contract. It's somewhat more, it's stable for budgeting purposes to have a fixed rate loan because you know exactly how much you owe every month for that period of time, so it's easy to budget for. The other thing about variable rates is in economic times when interest rates are really going up quickly, your payment's going to change rapidly over time. So 1 year you might be paying $300, and then because interest rates are higher, the next year that payment might go up by 50 or 75 bucks a month. And it's like, whoa, what just happened to this payment? Well, that's what happens. That's part of the risk on a variable rate loan, particularly if interest rates skyrocket out of nowhere, which doesn't seem likely to happen based on where we're at right now in our economic history. But you just never know for sure. Never know for sure. And then, of course, there are a lot of sources of consumer loans, meaning these are businesses and organizations that actually give loans for those purposes. As you see, most of them are companies. It is not advisable to get loans from family or friends because I think that you put your relationship in jeopardy if you default. And I think the relationship is probably worth a lot more in the long run through your life than whatever loan you're getting. It has more value over your lifetime. So it's not advisable to borrow money from friends or relatives because there's this, you're risking more than not paying the loan back, for sure. Okay. But all these other places, it's a competitive environment to some degree in terms of where you can actually look for and find consumer loans. But, and you should look at more than one place for car loans or things like this. I mean, you should shop around a little bit. If you have good credit, you're going to get very good rates. If you rely on a consumer finance company, they are very, very easy to give you a loan. It's easy money, but they're taking a risk with that. So they charge you incredibly high interest rates in most cases. And that's why I've seen a commercial for some of the local auto dealers who says, we'll guarantee you're going to walk out of this, as long as you have a job, we'll guarantee you're going to walk out of this place with a car. We'll get you that loan. All right, well, they probably could get you that loan. I wouldn't want to see the price of that loan in terms of the interest rate they want to charge you. But they could because, again, your credit rating is going to determine how much the rate of interest is on a loan. Okay. Again, we already went over commercial banks, credit union, savings and loans and savings banks. Again, it depends. I think credit unions and savings banks have low rates. S&Ls and commercial banks tend to have a little bit higher rates unless you have very, very good credit. There are a lot of companies that have their own finance department. So if you buy a Toyota and you get approved from Toyota Motor Credit, then that's a sales finance company. So basically they're helping people buy their cars and finance their cars at the same time. It's the same company. General Motors, so if you go to a GM dealer and buy a car and you get approved from General Motors Credit, then that's a sales finance company. That's that. Some life insurance companies actually have consumer loans, believe it or not. It's not really a popular option for a lot of people, but if you have life insurance policy, they offer some type of loan as well. Most of us are going to be dealing with everything else. And I think that's basically, in terms of the features, there's always finance charges. So you want to know what those are. We went over the student loans. They actually have a finance charge right up front. They take that fee up front before they give you the rest of the money for the loan. Find out what those are. That adds to the cost of the loan. Right? What's the interest rate on the loan? Is it fixed or variable? Is it going to change over time? When is it actually due? The loan maturity is the due date. So when is the loan actually due to be paid back? And because that's how many payments you're going to have, and each payment is going to have interest as well as paying the loan back. So all that interest is going to add up. So if you have a 4-year loan or if you have a 7-year loan, you're going to be paying a lot more interest on the 7-year loan. Yeah. So what's the total cost of everything? Add that up. Do you need to put up any collateral to get the loan? So auto loans, almost guaranteed you're going to need to put up the car as collateral. Personal loans, no. One of the really important things is, can you pay it off early? Some loans, actually most loans you can prepay in full without penalty. There are some structured finance loans that even if you try to pay them off early, they're going to add interest and fees to that last payment. And so you're really not saving as much money as you'd like to when you pay a loan off early. The reason you pay a loan off early is so you can stop having the loan payment, stop paying the interest. But if they're going to penalize you by paying early, by adding additional interest or fees at the end, well, they may not be as good of a deal as another lender. And what if you're late? And what's the fees that they charge you? All this is very, very important to sort of understand when it comes to borrowing money for any type of loan. And it's highly recommended that you look at that. Okay, I'm going to come back because we're basically almost out of time, and I wanted to give you a chance to ask a few questions before we ended our class session today.